Who's ready to win the day in sports? I know you are. Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com, Monday through Friday, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Justin Fensterman, and let's break everything down from a fantasy sports perspective. What's going on, everybody? High noon indeed here in the middle of the week on your Wednesday. My name is Justin Fensterman, and welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily right here on the Elite Plus Network. For the next hour or so, we'll be talking a lot of football with all of you. In general, I know a lot of you still into baseball now. Ray Flowers, normally hosting this show, does a lot of that baseball content. For today, though, from the baseball standpoint, Scott Bonder will be on the Cash Game Breakdown. Chris Rose on the GPP. So we're not forgetting about baseball, but we know what the bread and butter is right now, and that is fantasy football. So I hope everybody is having a great week. I hope at this point, when it comes to your fantasy teams, you're not going too crazy, because I'm going to go over some strategies when it comes to trading just to remember. So all of you out there who didn't have a great week one aren't just going to undersell your players just because of paranoia that this is going to be how the rest of your season is going to go. You just got to remember, it is the first week. Now, before we get started on the fantasy football talk, naturally today being September 11th, I just feel the need to say something, and there's a reason behind that. Naturally, 23 years ago, the entire face of our country changed, and me growing up in New York, being on Long Island, remember my dad he's an attorney driving to Brooklyn to go to court early that morning before it even happened. So I knew I was worried. I knew that when, of course, what happened, terrorist attacks for September 11th happened, I was on my way to a band lesson in high school on Long Island, New York. My conductor's listening to the radio, and it was a very sad and scary day with a few of my friends back in high school losing family members, unfortunately. And on days like today, because we're all involved in our own lives and making sure we're making it through the day, winning the day. I talk about that a lot. But days like today should also remind us that we have to sometimes stop and smell the roses and be thankful that we are living, because a lot of people had their lives, unfortunately and unfairly, taken away from them. So that's why when it comes to September 11th, I use that as a reminder that we all being here have to make sure that not only are we taking care of our lives professionally, not only do we have to remember to take care of our families, but also personally too, and taking care of ourselves, making sure we're doing things that we want to do, setting some time for ourselves, also setting extra time for our loved ones out there as well. And I know it changed a lot of lives, and that's why I wanted to open up and say, obviously, me being from New York and now living in the Washington, D.C. area, after moving from New York, I've got to represent New York right here and everything as we remember what happened 23 years ago. Just felt I had to say something there, and I know a lot of people have their feelings about it. So, Jack, I see you right there. And yeah, it's right, very scary what happened 23 years ago. And that's why we all have to use it as an awareness right now to make sure that we are telling our loved ones we always love them, spending some time with them, but also taking care of ourselves too. As someone who works a lot and has never been great at balancing that, I have those improvements to make, and days like today remind me of that. So let's talk about what is on the agenda. I kind of mentioned it before already. So we're going to talk about injuries, because we've got some injury news trickling in. Man, already Thursday of week 2 coming up tomorrow. It's fast and furious. That's how the cycle goes when it comes to fantasy football. Fantasy Bosco, Rich Maletto, going to stop by like he did last week to talk about streamers. He hit on some very nice streamers for all of you, but do they translate necessarily long-term or even a week 2? Going to talk to the Bosco about that. And by the way, you can follow me on socials at Fensty Sports on X and also on Instagram. Jeff Manns' rankings are out for week 2. So get on those, fantasyguru.com, and you see the link right there, and you have the when it comes to the content landing page that we have, then you can find all of the week 2 content pieces that we have, including my own, which will be out later today. So with that, by the way, I'm sorry I am not here to turn on other people outside of fantasy content. So with that, I'm sorry about that. This is not going to happen there, but I like to make at least all of your fantasy sports dreams come true. Can I really look at me? Can I make your actual fantasies come true? I think not. But some of you like the way Rich Maletto looks, so maybe he can do that in a little bit here. But the content landing page is awesome. It keeps you very organized. We have a lot of content coming out. Jeff Manns will have One Man's Opinion podcast coming out. He has Elite Sports on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. That's SiriusXM Channel 87 from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Ray Flowers will be joining him, and they'll talk all things football, getting you ready for week 2. So we've got content coming in fast and furiously, and the content landing page obviously will be updated every week. That's why it's there, so you can find everything that we have on a weekly basis for not only season long, but for DFS as well. So with some of the news, by the way, when it comes to the practice reports that I'm going to just talk about quickly, I don't look at one source. I try to find at least 2, if not 3 sources that I view as credible. I've been doing the practice reports, but also more importantly than that, I've been producing, well, I don't really produce radio shows anymore, but I'm still looking up different articles, different beat writers like I am anyway. So I've always tried to make sure that if I were going to be passing along a major piece of news, that there were credible sources behind. I don't like to play guessing games. I don't like to do that. If I can't source something, then I'm going to make sure I write that it's my own opinion so you aren't misled. Now, a few of my friends, as I'm sure a lot of you who have Christian McCaffrey, were probably freaking out. And I'm not making any excuses as the guy who does the practice reports Wednesday and Thursday, and then the weekly NFL injury report that I update, by the way. It's not just I hand it in Friday and go see you later. I'm updating it Friday night. That's my first pass through generally. Saturday morning, I make sure I get back to it. Maybe even Saturday afternoon as well if a piece of breaking news that's huge comes out. I am updating this thing even Sunday morning too. And by the way, Sunday morning for everybody that came together like an elite mafia family should, thank you very much. Had a little bit of trouble updating that after a little while, but hey, we all had our content out there. And that's why, by the way, in Discord, it's so important that if you're part of our site at fantasyguru.com and part of the Elite Mafia, that you're taking advantage of Discord. To me, it's the best tool that we have because it gives you the chance and it gives you the opportunity to not only get your questions answered, but to also see what everybody's talking about, different breaking news that's coming out, where our content is, chats. I'll talk about different chats that are going on. And that's why you got to make sure you are constantly getting in to Discord there. Always looking to give you guys updates, even right up to game times on those game days. That's what it means to be a part of the Elite Mafia. And having that Discord is massive, not only for football, but for all sports as well. So looking at the Christian McCaffrey situation very quickly, I had no idea he wasn't going to play. Everything that I was reading, he was practicing. I was reading that by multiple writers, multiple. And yes, I knew that going in, he had a couple of injuries. All of a sudden, it became from the calf to the calf of the Achilles. But I did not think, like a lot of other people did, that this guy wasn't going to play Monday night against the Jets. I had to take a 0. In one of our Elite Mafia leagues, I had to take a 0. I had nowhere to go. And it sucked. I was down by 6 points. Unfortunately, my handcuff of choice, Jordan Mason, was taken. I had nowhere else to go. I did not think that this guy was going to be inactive. It was shocking to me. But that happens sometimes in sports. Are the reporters doing their job? I don't know. Do they have some kind of silence order regarding certain players? I don't know. But stuff like that makes me think so. So I had no idea at that point, updating on Saturday, no idea that he wouldn't play. From the reports that I saw, a lot of people, a lot of those writers and people close to the situation were saying that he was going to play. So that to me is one of those things in fantasy football where you just shrug your shoulders and you move on because It's unfortunate. It's frustrating to someone like me who does the injury report because I take the injury report very seriously. I know you all don't have a lot of time to look at it and to even read the analysis. I know you're looking for keywords. I thought he was playing, and a lot of other people did too, and it sucked. It sucked, especially for those that are in guillotine leagues. Nothing to do. What do? You're going to drop McCaffrey. Let's say you have a 25, 30-point lead. You're going to drop McCaffrey and then pick up because Mason wasn't there. Grendo was there in the guillotine league I was in. But do you drop McCaffrey to pick him up to try to get yourself at least a few more points of pad so you survive that week one? Now, with week two, from what we're hearing from reports, and this is Ian Rappaport, so just know that Ian Rappaport, coin flip whether or not this is actually going to be true or not, but we have been hearing these murmurs for the last few days that McCaffrey will likely be inactive for week two. And with that, that really stinks, but at least we can start preparing for it. Meaning that as we're preparing for those that have McCaffrey, like me, I've got one share of McCaffrey. We've got to prepare almost like he's not going to play. I don't care at that point what the practice report says. He's a marked man to me. And I'm going to write that he can log full practices the rest of the week. You can see how much this bothers me because I don't want to mislead anybody. And I'm not blaming myself. This was one of those rare instances where we were given absolutely no leads to that. Oh, but Fensty, he was questionable. He was designated. Yeah, well, the reports that I was reading and from what I was seeing in practice, this guy was playing. Then he didn't. So we have to go into week two now like he's not going to play, in my opinion. If he ends up playing, it's an added bonus. But at this point, it's very hard to trust with Christian McCaffrey. And for those that are saying, oh, well, this is McCaffrey and he gets hurt and this and that, when he's on the field, he's hella productive. We all know that. But when he's not on the field right now, it's very risky, and we can't rely on this guy until we're given that confirmation. 1 o'clock game against Minnesota, so we should know, and we shouldn't be misled. We were pretty misled. The time of the game, it stunk. We were all put in a corner, and that's the way it is right there with Christian McCaffrey. So that's what we're seeing regarding McCaffrey. And again, it's Ian Rappaport, so let's pump the brakes, but it's hard to really think he's going to end up playing at this point after what happened last week. And if he does play, it's an added bonus, but the timing is going to be a lot better. Very frustrating fantasy situation. Normally that's something we get mid-season, not week one, but now we're all on our toes. So if a player on your team is designated questionable, but you're seeing them practice, you're reading that I'm writing, they're practicing, even logging a full practice at the end of the week after logging limited practices, we still got to make sure we watch for that designation. A lot of things change, and I'm going to be updating that injury report all the way up to those 1 o'clock games on Sundays. But before we even get to Sunday, we got to get to Thursday because we got a little bit of a situation in Miami, and that's Raheem Mostert, who last year, Mr. Touchdown Machine, dealing with a chest injury. He is not going to play tomorrow night against the Buffalo Bills. Achane, someone else who's no stranger to injury, dealing with an ankle injury. He is a game-time decision in this very matchup. And I just got to say that while a lot of focus is on Jaylen Wright, make sure you grab him late in fantasy drafts, and that's all great and good. But we can't forget about somebody else that's on this team too. Somebody else, by the way, who has proven that he can carry the rock before. Somebody else who's familiar with Mike McDaniel. Jeff Wilson isn't just some rando. Why do you think Raheem Mostert is here in Miami? Mike McDaniel, the familiarity factor. And if Achane plays, Wilson could get that goal line work, the short yardage work. This is a guy who's averaged 4.5 yards per carry for his career. One season over 5 yards, but up there, especially in the last few. And he didn't get a lot of opportunities. But in 2020, when he had a $126, nearly 5 yards per carry. Behind a strong O-line, I get that. But we have seen it before from this guy. Last year, we saw him carry the ball 40 times, over 4.5 yards per carry. The season before, we saw 84 carries, a little bit more of a sample size for nearly 400 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. So this isn't just some rando. He's proven he can carry the rock. So for those that are just looking for a little bit of a Band-Aid, and for the Miami Dolphins who are at this point looking for a Band-Aid because we don't know what the future holds for Mostert. In comments, Mike McDaniel wouldn't commit that it's a one and done and that's it and he'll be back week 3. No, he left the door open that Mostert could miss another game or 2 in addition to this one tomorrow night in week 2. So now with Achane not being 100% and Miami thinking, well, they're going to have to look to preserve him, Jeff Wilson could be looking at that work. It wasn't Wright that got the few carries. It was Jeff Wilson. And Jeff Wilson with those carries, did pretty well with them. 5 for 26 over 5 yards per carry. The reason I'm saying this, it's nothing that's too major from week 1. But he's got the experience. McDaniel knows him. So while I'm hearing all this about Wright, and I get it, next man up, we want to get our depth at running back, very hard to secure on the waiver wire, even week 1 and week 2. We know this. But at the same time, this guy has proven that he can carry the rock and the coach is comfortable with him. So if you're planning on starting someone not named Achane, let's say Achane's playing, and you're considering starting another back from Miami, let's say you're dealing with some really crappy situations on your team and you're forced, well, then maybe Jeff Wilson is the way to go. Stash long-term, very hard to tell. We don't know the deal with Mostert. Achane plays, we might not see much of Wilson, but we know that Miami obviously knows that his health issues that he's had, and this early now dealing with this ankle injury, should keep him somewhat in check. I don't know if Jaylen Wright is that guy right now, but Jeff Wilson is if you need a little bit of a Band-Aid. That's at least what I'm thinking there. Achane sits, then both guys could be utilized. And when it came to running against Buffalo, we saw Kyler able to do it because that's what Kyler Murray does. James Conner, nothing too special, under 4 yards per carry, did get in the box. So from this situation right here, while there's a lot of focus because I think that we think long-term, can this guy be someone that down the road helps me? We have to think short-term as well. Jeff Wilson could be that guy. Jeff Wilson can be the short-term guy for at least the next couple of weeks, especially with Achane like this. I was kind of wondering about this with the Detroit Lions coming in because the Detroit Lions, and was talking about this with Ray Flowers on SiriusXM, which, by the way, he filled in on Fantasy Football Postgame, which airs on SiriusXM Channel 87 every Sunday night, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll be on there with James Coe, breaking everything down and getting your reactions as well. But one of the things that I was wondering, because we also talked Sunday Night Football, was that with Jahmyr Gibbs coming into the year, maybe wondering if Detroit would lay off of him a little bit to slowly integrate him into the system. Well, they gave Montgomery a good amount of carries there. So that's something that now I'm starting to think about with some of these other nicked up players this early in the season. So for me, when it comes to the situation with these running back groups, you want to make sure you try to scoop up these guys. Injuries happen, man. Not everything is season ending. For now, when it comes to injuries, we want to stash those running backs. That's something that we got to start taking advantage of now if you have those open roster spots. So we're going to talk some streamers. We'll get Rich Maletto, the Fantasy Bosco's opinion on this. He does a lot when it comes to streaming for the week. But ultimately, with this Miami situation, don't forget about Jeff Wilson. Guy can carry the rock. Big dude, he can carry the load. Talking touchdown vultures, even if Achane plays. So something to think about right there. It's not all about Jaylen Wright, especially in this type of situation. If both were out, okay. Now we're all going to grab our popcorn and see what happens. Now I know Jeff Wilson in that situation has a floor, and there's a chance that Achane doesn't play. So if you have Achane right now, or if you have Mostert for that matter, Make sure you're going to grab Jeff Wilson, because this is something else I wanted to bring up. There are some leagues that have waivers process Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Eastern. Other leagues, waivers process Thursday morning, 3 a.m. Eastern. And here's my opinion on this matter, because I remember when I was producing the Elite Sports Show with Jeff Mans, and Jeff and I would go back and forth on when we should talk about certain topics. Jeff wanted to do waivers on Wednesdays. And I said to him, well, Jeff, a lot of default, and I noticed this with Yahoo at least, a lot of default waivers where the commissioners aren't changing every setting like they should be. They should be checking every setting. That a lot of default leagues on these free sites have waivers run Tuesday into Wednesday at 3 a.m. Eastern. And we would go back and forth on what's right versus what the masses are doing, the casual players are doing. But waivers should absolutely be run Wednesday into Thursday, in my opinion. Now, my home league, it's Tuesday into Wednesday, and I dropped the ball because I wanted to change that and put that up for a vote, and it completely slipped my mind until I was checking the finalization of my settings again, and I said I meant to bring this up to the group to see what they thought. I didn't do that. Next year, it's going to be the first thing I do. Now, there's one problem with that this year for those that are doing waivers Wednesday into Thursday. And that's, I believe here, December 25th, certain holiday everybody knows about, is on a Wednesday. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure. I thought Christmas, though, was on the Wednesday. So with that, that could be a little bit problematic for all of you commissioners out there. And again, I could be totally wrong about this. The 21st is okay. So Monday, December 23rd, and then so Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday. That's Christmas. We're going to have action on that day. That week, by the way, which is week 17, our championship week, you may want to work something out with your league now. That way it's agreed upon. Because technically you've made the rules this way. So you can't change them. But the reason I'm bringing this up now is to bring this up to your league if you have waivers processing Thursday. Because likely you're going to be in your championship. For those that play through week 18, you're in your semifinal. You're not going to have the opportunity to run waivers. And my opinion is you should do it manually. You absolutely should if you're a commissioner. Something you have to think about. For me in my league, I kind of got lucky with that because I have Tuesday into Wednesday. But next year, if something like this were to happen, because the NFL on Christmas isn't going away. This year, though, for all of you fantasy football commissioners out there, Wednesday, we got 2 games. Your waivers aren't running until that night. What are you going to do? You might want to talk to your leagues about that right now. I know, and there are going to be so many fantasy football commissioners that aren't going to think about this until a week or two before, when their league mates go, hey, how are you handling this? We're going to be in our finals, not have access to waivers before Kansas City, Pittsburgh. Let's say there's some rando Chiefs receiver. We've got receivers hurt now in Kansas City. Let's say there's a rando out there. If Patrick Mahomes is missing some weapons by then, that could be out there. You wouldn't have access to him. Fantasy commissioners, make sure you're getting this done. I think waivers should absolutely be run on Wednesdays into Thursdays. So Thursday morning, essentially. I know it's a little confusing. 3 a.m. Eastern. But for this situation this year, you got to make sure you are getting to your leagues. And that's my thoughts when it comes to waivers. Because I was thinking about this. I messed it up totally in my league. And then I'm looking at, of course, Christmas, because I think it's funny and absolutely hilarious. What days don't we have football on anymore? It's pretty much Tuesdays, and that's it. Here are Wednesday games like we're still in the pandemic or something like that. Baltimore, Houston, Kansas City, at Pittsburgh. That's reality. That's what's going on. And if it's not agreed upon, you really can't make that move. So I would maybe get to your league right now. And if your league votes that down, I really don't understand why. I have a feeling, though, that if you wait a month and a half or even 2 months to address this, now you're going to have teams that are likely out of it and are going to want to vote no just to vote it down. get ahead of the game. That's what we have to do. Other action that we have to talk about here, the Colts. And we are seeing reports that Josh Downs is going to practice. We don't know if it's going to be a full practice or not. But I was actually listening to Fantasy Football pregame. Jeff Mans and Bob Harris on Fantasy Sports Radio every Sunday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. And they talk to reporters at the field. And the Colts beat reporter they were talking about were mentioning that Alec Pierce, who was a pretty popular waiver pickup, Alec Pierce is someone that can be utilized as the team's deep threat. Now, will there be enough piece of the offensive pie to go around once Josh Downs is ready to play? Because you already have Michael Pittman there. You also, by the way, already have Adonai Mitchell, the rookie, as well. And Mitchell, who got targeted 5 times in the game, Anthony Richardson could have hit him in the end zone or at least once for a TD twice in this game. I saw 2 deep passes to this guy that were just out of reach, overthrew him multiple times in the game. So with this situation, I like Alec Pierce, but if Josh Downs is playing, we have to be careful. But if you're in desperate need for some reason of a receiver, or if you have a heavy bench, let's just say, don't just drop Mitchell, because this guy was hit up a few times and we could see him getting some deep plays. So for me, while the beat writer that was on with Jeff Mans and Bob Harris on Sunday that convinced me to just pick up Alec Pierce in one of my deeper leagues just to stash him because I didn't end up playing him, we saw Alec Pierce take advantage of that. We saw Alec Pierce get hit deep. So does that continue when Josh Downs is ready to go? I'm not so sure about that. Anthony Richardson going to stop running? That's not going to be the case. So there's a lot of competition in this offense, including your mobile quarterback, just so great on his feet. He just has to be careful. So that's how you get hurt. But with the whole Indy situation, that's why, to me, the Downs injury issue right now is very important heading into week 2, because I would love to be able to start a home run deep threat, especially maybe even in DFS as well. But at this point, it could have very well been Mitchell that was on the receiving end of a long touchdown. If I wasn't really seeing Mitchell get targeted, he wasn't being hit deep, just a little crap pass and that's it, that's one thing. But I was literally seeing him get separation. I was seeing him utilize the speed that he has. And that's something that we should be watching for down the road. Pierce has more experience. Maybe he's leaned on a little bit more. And if Josh Downs is out, I'm fine with him. Let's say the heavy starting lineup, you need a third flex, he's your final guy. I'm fine with that. But you are hoping at that point for something deep. And when it comes to the Colts situation, I'm just interested to see the bounce back here from Jonathan Taylor in week 2. And I know it was underwhelming. Week 1 can be very underwhelming, and it was. I had multiple teams where Rashid Shaheed, that's right, Rashid Shaheed was my top scorer. Pretty sad, but that's the reality of it. We're going to have those weeks. Your studs aren't going to always perform up to par. And that's where I must tell you all one of my biggest trade strategies before we welcome in the fantasy Bosco, Rich Maletto. When making trades in fantasy football, trade out of need, not desire. Something I've been saying for a long time. People love just trading in fantasy football or in fantasy sports in general. They love just making trades. And trading and the concept of trading is a lot of fun. Maybe you played video games and you play NBA 2K or you played NBA Live and you were able to make trades with the computer so you get yourself a really awesome star-studded team. That's great. It's a lot of fun. But in fantasy football, not keeping a foundation won't lead you to victory. It won't get you that title if you're constantly changing that foundation. I'm not talking about reacting from injuries. I'm talking about making trades, and I know people make trades every week or every other week just because they think it's fun. To me, trading's not fun. I hate trading in fantasy sports. It's showing me that I can't find anything to even patch a need that I have, so I have to make a trade. And if you lose that trade, by the way, if you're trading the better overall player, but you're fulfilling a need, I'm stacked at wide receiver. I have no running back help. I'm trading a more productive wide receiver for a running back who hasn't been producing as much, but is someone that's still getting that safe floor when it comes to volume, running behind a decent offensive line, showing that consistency. Then both people can win the trade. You don't have to have just one person winning a trade. The best trades are when we both win. When you fulfill your need and I fulfill mine. And that's okay, because I'm used to dealing with so many people that are like, I have to win the trade. And others that are like, not only do I have to win the trade, but I have to destroy the trade. You give up the best player in the deal on paper. Yeah, hard to see on paper, hard to see on your app that you just traded a better player. Maybe you get a little flack from your league mates. I can't believe you just traded this guy. Well, that's what you have to do sometimes, but not just to trade. Trade out of need, not desire. I cannot stretch that enough when it comes to trading in fantasy. I don't like trading. I don't. I'll do it if I have to. I don't like trading. That's why a lot of trades that I've made are minor trades. So with that right there, I'll get Rich Maletto, the fantasy Bosco. I'll get his opinion on this matter here. Rich, what's going on? Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, and I'm sorry if I scared you with that rant.
No, I was coming through the phone trying to rant with you because I've just been in Discord dealing with some of these trade questions. And I'd like to add to a couple of things you said. I'm with you. I hate trading. People that don't understand why. I don't need the action. I don't. And maybe it's because I'm in too many leagues, because my cousin and I have this discussion because he loves to trade. And I tell him all the time, you're not getting significant upgrades. Well, but I think this guy's a little bit better. I don't see. You're looking at it as, oh, I'm getting a great value on the guy I'm getting back. Are you though? Like, one, I never ever do player swaps. Same position players, 1-for-1, I never do. We have been getting way too many questions about that, in my opinion, in the Discord. There is no win for you. The only reason to do a trade is to upgrade your team, fill a need, like Justin said. Why do I hate it so much? It's a time suck. I have to spend my time convincing you to see the players the same way I do. It's a lost cause. It is a completely lost cause. And then to add to the point that you made about everyone's got to fleece or everyone's got to win the trade, there should be a win-win. If I upgrade my RB and you upgrade your receiver, that's a great trade. Nobody does that. I've got to get the two best players in the deal or I'm not doing a trade. It is the biggest waste of time, and people chase the action. If you want to chase the action, chase the action. But I'll tell you right now, trading with me is virtually impossible. You can ask the guys from the Fantasy Guru Dynasty League. It is tough to trade with me. I don't like it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time working out deals because it's a big time suck that goes nowhere. And I'm only going to do it to fill a need or get an upgrade I need to be competitive. That's it. That is the only reason. And chasing action, I just can't do, Justin. I can't do it.
You ever get a trade offer where it's so ridiculously lopsided and it's one of your friends and you text them on the side, what is this? You reject it, maybe write a not nice comment in the comments and you reject it. And then you have the conversation on the side and you're like, hey, what? This trade's crap. Why? And the person goes, well, a negotiation has to start somewhere. I hate that. I hate that. Don't waste my freaking time. Stop wasting my freaking time. Give me something that we can build towards, not something that you're just putting together that's crap just to get the talks rolling. Let's get ahead of the game.
I've done that, and I've said, okay, so when you go buy a car and they're so outlandish, do you sit around for 2 hours negotiating because they had to start somewhere? Or do you leave because you thought it was ridiculous and it was insulting? Because I said, I'll tell you right now, you send me offers like that again, and guess what? I automatically just reject. Like now you are a mental or a physical. I will physically write names down and make notes about how bad the offers were. So when I get trades from you, you have to pay a tax now. Now, if we're actually going to get a trade done, not only does it have to be fair, you're paying a tax because you've wasted my time and insulted me, which means we're probably never trading again. And I'll tell them that straight up. Well, I hate to tell it to you, we're never getting a trade done now because you just completely insulted me. So, sorry, deal with it. And I'll walk away. And it's amazing. The leagues I've done this in, years later, I get some of the most reasonable offers where I have to go, really, they're offering me this? Like, I need to sit down and think about it. You draw that line in the sand and tell them F off enough, eventually they get it. And I'll tell you right now, you do not, in redraft, Dynasty is a little different. In redraft, you do not have to trade to win. I don't care how desperate you are with your roster. I can promise you, I have taken garbage teams and grinded on the waiver wire without any money, grabbing backups the week before, playing the waiver wire 2 weeks ahead, and gone to the playoffs without doing any trades. You want the action, get the action. But I tell you what, it's a waste of time.
So you want to hear this? I'm listening to Mans on Elite Sports yesterday, and he got a call from someone who was getting offered Christian McCaffrey. And this guy also has Jordan Mason. And he's offering McCaffrey. And the first thing Jeff's saying is, well, where's Jordan Mason there? And the guy who's offering McCaffrey also has Mason. I'm sitting there just laughing with people trying their little voodoo and tricks and everything. And look, Rich, at the end of the day, yeah, it's really hard to make a deal where everybody wins. And these lopsided deals, especially the ones where you're giving away a good player, but you're getting like 4 or 5 crappy players. Rich, that reminds me of when I used to trade sports cards. I would take all my crappy common cards, put them in a box, but I'd put like a little mid-player autograph in the box, and I'd advertise it. Here's a box of cards. Maybe these players will be good, but there's an autograph in here, and I'd be able to offload an entire box of crappy cards that are just waste of space in my closet. That's what those kinds of trades are.
You know, I always compare it to this. Would you trade away a Lamborghini for 4 Pentos?
No.
I'm serious. That's what these offers are, right? And I tell everyone all the time, I'm never going to trade a Lambo for 4 Pentos or 3 or 2 or whatever it is. There is no sense to it. And I do not understand the obsession with trading. I really don't. And here's a couple other things. Just because someone puts something on the block, you don't have to offer it. Just because someone sends you an offer, you don't have to entertain it. Just because someone says they're interested in your player, you don't have to send an offer. If someone wants your players, make them send an offer. Make them do the work. Make them put in the time. If you want the player that's on the block, go for it. But if the player doesn't help you, like I took a question today, the guy is struggling at running back, and he's talking about making offers for Devontae Smith or Jaylen Waddle. Why? You're loaded at receiver. Go find a team that's loaded at running back and needs receiver help. I don't understand why it's so hard to do these win-win trades, because I find them, but nobody willing to do them. I'll be like, look, you need a receiver. I've got extra. I need a running back. You got it. Yeah, but you know, this guy, everyone's got to play that angle. And I tell you this too, Justin, I don't know about you. If you ask me in Discord who won this trade, I automatically ignored the question because I posted this in my articles. I do not do who won this trade. If your goal is to win a trade, you're not trading for the right reasons, and I'm not interested in having the discussion. If you ask me, hey, do you think this helped my team? I'll have that discussion with you all day long. But you ask me of who won this deal, I'm not talking that discussion at all.
Well, yeah, because it's an unfair question to ask. You're better off coming to us before you make that deal and ask us, hey, who's going to win this deal if I make this deal? By the way, here's my depth. Then it's like it's starting with a crappy trade. You're building up to what the eventual fair deal could be, where you could cut all that out and then just offer a somewhat fair deal. So that's why for me, when it comes to fantasy football trades, I'm down with making them, but I don't look to make them. I don't enter a year like I can't wait to make all these trades with my league. Trade out of need, not desire. But Rich, you write your streaming article, and I got to ask you about Jaylen Wright, because this is someone that you touched on here. And I don't know if you saw what I was talking about a few minutes ago with the Miami run game. We know that on Thursday, we're not going to have Raheem Mostert. Achane is a game time decision. And you were writing about Jaylen Wright. But for me, I'm thinking that Jeff Wilson isn't just some rando. Familiar with the coach. You heard what I was saying about that. So I got to get your take on this. Let's say Achane is in, because you write about streamers at fantasyguru.com. How do you feel that Jaylen Wright is going to be integrated into this game after he wasn't last game? Wilson got 5 carries, was pretty effective with those limited amount of carries. Where does Wright fit into this situation?
The reason I leaned Wright over Wilson, I feel like Wright has more staying power, right? Of all the running backs there in Miami, he's a little bigger. with the athleticism. And I'm a sizist, man. Part of the reason I've been very meh on Achane is I'm worried about his size. I have a page where I keep game day notes, and I kid you not, I was like, wow, I can't believe the volume Achane's getting. We're getting goal line work. If this truly is the volume, like I'm going to be in, I'm worried about holding up over the long haul. Not more than 5 minutes later, he's out of the game, questionable to return with the ankle injury. So that's the reason I lean more right. I think for this week, Wilson is an excellent play. Wilson's going to be the first one up, right? Like, I don't think there's any question about that. After Mostert and Achane went down, it was basically the Jeff Wilson show. I added Jeff Wilson in a couple of places as well. He probably should have been mentioned in the article. Shame on me. I was just mentioning, hey, here's the guy for Wright, even if he's not all that this week, because I assumed Wilson would have been the hot pickup because he did play. We have data on him where Wright was the healthy scratch, right? So unless you're kind of a degenerate like us and just craving for these rookies to come through, you're probably already looking at Jeff Wilson out there. But he definitely deserves to be in the conversation. And I'll be frank, I don't know how much work you're going to see from Achane. I mean, he looked fine in the video we saw. He wasn't cutting. I get leery on any of these ankle injuries, regardless, low, high, otherwise, they linger, they come back. So we may see Achane for half the game, and then we hear he's hobbled again, and depending on game flow, we may not see him back out there. I don't know. So look, if you have IR spots that can move people around and get both Wilson and Wright, I'm all for it. I really am. But if I had to pick and choose, I'll go with Wright just because I think in week 8, that's the discussion we're going to have about Jaylen Wright playing and Wilson kind of being back in that backup role.
Yeah, you can't, and that's the problem here, at least on some of the, again, I reference the free sites a lot, Rich, because that's where I feel the casual fantasy player does play. They don't necessarily go to my fantasy league. They don't necessarily go, they play Yahoo, ESPN, for instance. But with that, at least the rules, which I'm so glad that these free sites have adjusted to certain things that are unethical in fantasy football, like hoarding players that aren't on the IR. It makes it a lot easier for fantasy commissioners out there. But until the player's ruled out, you can't put them on that IR on Yahoo. So for those that are dealing with Mostert right now, you're in a different position than Achane, and you could be dealing with that Achane situation until 6:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. So that's where the difference of strategy comes in with these two. And here's the other, we're missing some guys on defense. That's the other thing too. So the Bills are going in with at least 2 guys that are missing that I saw. Solomon, and I'll have, by the way, the practice report out a little bit later on. Wait until kind of normally handed in around, just for context sake, about 5:30 p.m. Eastern-ish. And then after it's posted, I do my pass through for the updates for those West teams out there that haven't given their full practice report just yet. But with guys like Smoot and Johnson outright there, could take a little bit of that defensive pressure off for Buffalo. But ultimately with this Miami game, we know there's going to be a lot of passing, but we have to see what the deal is with Achane. And I agree with Rich here, by the way, that I don't see, even if Achane does play, I don't want to say limited, but whatever ceiling you're expecting from him, I'm not sure we're getting that. And you're going to see at least some involvement from another back right here, Rich. By the way, I want to give you some credit too, because you wrote about some streamers that really came through. Talk about a top 5 quarterback. Brush that dirt off your shoulders, Maletto, because Derek Carr, somebody out there that for those that streamed and started him, he got a top 5 performance. And then the inaccurate Sam Darnold. And that's where I want to ask you about Sam Darnold, because was it that the Giants are just so crappy, or do you actually want to put some trust into this guy against the defending NFC champions?
This week is going to be a telling sign, because I went back. Paul Charchian, right? He's always got some great stuff. So he shared some things, and he's a Vikings guy, right? So he shared some things. So I went back and tried to watch, because that was one of the 8 games, because of how YouTube has it, I can't watch like I used to. So that was one of the games I didn't have good eyes on. So I had to kind of go back and dig up some film. That offensive line for the Vikings played lights out. Now, how much of that is the Giants' defensive line sucking? We know they made improvements. I have a hard time going, the Giants' defensive line sucks with Thibodeau and Burns out there. Like, I had higher expectations for that defensive line. You would have no idea they had any talent whatsoever. The Vikings' offensive line straight up dominated that entire game. If Darnold isn't going to see ghosts, like he's claimed in the past, right? And he's going to be able to stand upright and throw. You know, Vincey, we've talked about this off air before. We're all about getting that offensive line intact. You get that offensive line intact, I'll use a backup running back. I'll use a backup quarterback. We can play and perform as an NFL team by protecting the run or the quarterback and giving our running back holes. So I think it all starts in the front with the defensive and offensive line. San Francisco has had a good defensive line. So I feel like this week is a telling tale. I'm cautiously optimistic. You know, at his low ownership, Vincey, if you're really hurting, especially say in a super flex league, like say you got Watson, I would use Darnold over Watson. I mean, I know Aaron Rodgers didn't look that great. He wasn't crisp. He wasn't clean. But I didn't feel like the San Francisco defense played lights out by any means. They definitely gave up some holes. The coverage was kind of lacking at times. Pressure got there okay. But if this Viking, and we'll find out, if the Vikings offensive line plays as well this week as they did last week, then I'm on the train of we need to watch this Vikings team because the front is good enough to keep them competitive week to week. Brian Flores will have that defense playing as good as last year or better. They were top 15 last year. So now we're talking about we don't need Darnold to do much. We need Darnold to be what we thought McCarthy would be or we think Herbert will be. Efficient, manage the ball, don't turn it over, put up 225, 250 yards passing, maybe a couple of TDs. He has the offensive weapons to throw to, even without Hawkinson there. So I'm cautiously optimistic. For me, Fency, this comes down to what are we going to see from the offensive line?
Right. And here's the thing. You mentioned Rodgers and Darnold, but I noticed a lot of similarities with their throwing styles, kind of more the gunslingers, zooming it right in. So the quick strikes from Darnold, because as I was reading what you were thinking, I was thinking in my head how he was going to have to put himself in the best position to succeed. And if it all comes down to that Vikings O-line, which you were mentioning before, I mean, he's going to have to look for a lot of things short because I don't know how much he's going to be able to get deep because he's not that accurate of a quarterback. So short, quick strikes, I feel like, are going to have to keep that ball moving down, maybe not looking at the deep stuff as much, but someone who did look at that deep ball, which is why, and I said this almost jokingly, except I clearly wasn't, I had multiple teams, Rich, where Rashid Shaheed was my highest scorer of the week. That's how my week one went. But his quarterback getting the job done and something that I think we're going to be seeing a lot of between that connection right there. How do you feel about Derek Carr going up against a tougher opponent than the Carolina Panthers and the Cowboys in week 2?
You know, I think this is going to be a great litmus test for how bad is Deshaun Watson. And granted, the Browns had 2 tackles missing, but Deshaun Watson looked absolutely terrible against this Cowboys defense. Mike Zimmer, much like Brian Flores, man, they're going to get these defenses to play well in their schemes. They're going to, we may not recognize these player names that they bring in and put at linebacker and DB and whatnot, but they're the type of players these defensive coaches want. This is going to be a big litmus test for Carr. I'm a little more apprehensive on Carr. I think if I had to choose between Darnold and Carr, I might actually lean Darnold, and that's simply because I have a little more faith in that Vikings offensive line. And maybe I was overimpressed and shouldn't have been in this Giants team is that bad. We know this Carolina team is that bad. There is no getting around it. And I could argue that, honestly, Carr, you should have played a little better for that team that you're playing against. Like, getting to 200 yards is fine, and the touchdowns were great. But I got to tell you, there was a lot of missed opportunities, I thought. And I kind of like Carr, Jawan Johnson. I know it looked like, if you go to Yahoo, it says the Cowboys did great against the tight end. They really didn't. David Njoku, before he got hurt, was about the Browns' only passing offense. Okay?
Yeah, he had like 4 for 44 there before he went out.
Right. And if you go look at the snap share, you could see he got hurt fairly early in the game because of the snap percentages. And where it went, it's like, holy crap, he was on his way to have probably an 8 for 100 type of day, right? So I'm kind of looking at the Saints tight ends, which David Carr has no problem turning to the tight ends. We've seen it I guess they were Los Angeles at the time, but the Raiders now in Vegas. We've seen it here last week with, again, Moreau. Are we shocked? He had that connection with the Raiders. So, Carr will probably be okay. At least having Kamara and Jamal, I think it'll keep the Cowboys a little more honest as far as that defensive front and bringing pressure. But look, this Cowboys defense, or this Dallas Cowboys defense, I got to tell you, man, the Cowboys, the Steelers, the Browns, I still think the Ravens are there. Those are probably the Bears. I think those are all top 5 defenses potentially this year, man.
Yeah, I went with in the leagues that I still actually have team defense in and not just a bunch of flex options now with no kicker defense. I went with the Steelers a lot of that way. It's just, again, the consistent, they're always just there. The Steelers are just like the cockroaches of the league because no matter what the circumstance is, at least in recent years, they're always hanging in there and competing for that playoff spot. We're talking week 18 with them having a chance to clinch if they win and these two other teams lose. I mean, that's the Steelers right there. So that's why I think Tomlin, just in general overall, runs a great organization. So that's why I went with the Steelers right there, Rich. Now, I want to ask you about other streamers that you're outlining this week for week 2 here. From the wide receiver standpoint, who are a few receivers that impressed you enough week 1 that you're willing to take a shot on for week 2?
Maybe it's because I'm in my own head, but I've got Quentin Johnston on there. And you can ask Russ and Tyler. I have been the biggest Quentin Johnston poo-pooer on staff. This goes back to before he was even drafted. I said the guy can't catch. His highlight reel was a bunch of defensive lowlights. We saw what I expected last year. The thing is I don't know if Harbaugh's like, hey, he's a body catcher, so we'll just give him routes where he can catch with his body. But they did. I mean, all the catches I saw this week were kind of body catches, slot routes across the middle, or slant routes across the middle where he's grabbing it here. They're just finding ways to get him the ball. He got plenty of targets. I mean, he really did. So I'll chase volume. And he's not owned right now. He's like 5% owned. So I can't believe I was saying it, but give me Quentin Johnston. Jalen McMillan, he played a lot. Didn't have a lot of targets, but he played more than all the other receivers for Tampa. He's the long ball guy. You're hoping for one big play. Don't get me wrong. So you're kind of rolling the dice. But look, if the guy's going to be on the field for 95% of the snaps and any ball he can take to the house, I'll roll the dice there, man. I mean, it's kind of the same thought in Quentin Johnston. We don't need a ton of volume for these guys to at least pay off as a streamer and get you 10 points.
Right. And I mean, look who they're facing too. I'm thinking of using them actually for Survivor now, just chasing the Panthers. I mean, that's really
right.
That's kind of how I want to handle it here for the first few weeks here. We have our own staff Survivor League, and I was still, a decent amount of people in that league, by the way, Rich, picked Cincinnati. So yeah, yep. I mean, I have no problem chasing the Panthers in fantasy and reality. Agreed. Right there. So let's talk, Rich, besides obviously your streamers article, why don't you tell everybody else who's still getting into regular season form, maybe they're first-time members and it's their rookie season as part of the Elite Mafia at fantasyguru.com. What else, when it comes to a content standpoint, are you bringing to the table?
So as much as I hate trading, I do have a buy, sell, cut article that a lot more popular than I thought it would be. There's oftentimes guys in there that are even waiver wire ads that I'm looking at. They're players I'm buying for whatever reason, trending up, injuries ahead of them. They produced offensive line, whatever the case may be. So buy, trade, cut, that comes out on Tuesdays. We got the weekly streamers on Wednesdays. And then the big start sit article that comes out on Fridays that I update on Friday night, Saturday night. That's always popular. Hey, tag us in Discord. Just be advised, you ask me start sit questions, unless it's about the Thursday night game, I'm not even going to address it till after the article because I do a lot of digging for the article. I try to mix in man's rankings. I try to give where I view differ from Jeff, just so you have an idea. So if you want to go by Jeff's rankings, you can understand where his rankings might fit in to my start sit list. I have no problem people using Jeff's rankings for what it's worth on start sit. That's what they're there for. I wish people would consider that more often, but that's kind of the thing. Once in a while, I'll be on the live stream. Also doing a little bit of NASCAR. We got Watkins Glen this weekend, so I'll have a NASCAR overview article coming out. And of course, the
any early vibes with that there, Rich? I mean, my guy, Billy Bye, is the defending champion.
I'm kind of feeling Kyle Larson, man. I can't really put my finger on it. He had a real hard hit last week in the Atlanta race. That was unfortunate. Christopher Bell has done very well here. Every time we talk, it seems like I mention Christopher Bell and it's bit us. But he's run well here where Denny Hamlin hasn't. Wouldn't surprise me to see Kyle Busch there hunting. RCR, hat tip, shout out to RCR. They found something. I don't know what it is, but over the last 3 weeks, they have found something. I need to get a hold of somebody over there at the team and be like, yo, I don't know what y'all are doing different, but you found something. You can see the speed difference on the track, so don't count out Kyle Busch.
So, and for those that may be just wondering that don't know in recent years how the NASCAR system has evolved and everything, are we in like the playoff area right now? I'm very just confused. You and I listen to NASCAR shows and everything. I tune in once every couple of weeks. Are we in the middle of the playoffs, or is this just like the beginning now of that stage?
So for the Cup Series, we just started the playoffs last week. Okay. For the Truck Series, which is off this week, we've already had the first race for the playoffs. For the Xfinity Series, this is the second to last race of the regular season. Look, NASCAR makes it so confusing. I wish I could just get management to understand. The more confusing you make it, the harder it is to bring in casual fans and to have us hardcore fans kind of bring in casual fans, because you make it so complicated. Like, I know Ratcliffe likes the playoffs. I'm not a fan. I tune into a race to watch a race. That's how I was raised. So I could really take or leave the playoffs. I don't like the wrecking it leads to. I don't like the draw. People love the drama. I get it. I don't need game 7. I want to race, but it is what it is.
Because every race is game 7. That's why it's got that type of thing to it. That's what it is. It's almost like football in a way. It's exactly like football. We're all doing, I mean, not me, but you. And whenever I have you on shows and I ask you a bunch of NASCAR questions, that's what I'm doing a little bit more of the research there. And we're sitting there with the anticipation of qualifying. And even with the qualifying and the heats, that brings up the dramatization factor. That's why can't they just keep it as they give points? You get this many points if you win a race, go all the way down, and then you have a champion at the end. And you know what? If your champion's already decided, so what? The last race is a formality. The NASCAR fan base is so loyal. People just like that there are races on.
I am 100% in agreement. They used to. And where this came about, there's a part of this whole fandom that I don't think NASCAR is willing to be honest about. Okay. They have always lost fans during the fall. This has always been a thing. Okay. And while this upcoming year in 2025, this is going to be the shortest as far as the time. The season's going to end November 2nd. That's the earliest the NASCAR season has ended since 1973. Okay. They've complained that the fandom wanes as the year goes. Well, I'll tell you, the season's too long. You had no problem with it really working well at 29 races. We're at 36. Even back then with the 29 races, it still went way too late in the fall, in my opinion. But at least there was breaks for both fans and drivers, okay, and teams. That's gone away, right? So now we're going to condense all this down. We're going to have all these races, and we're going to have all this drama. And they think it's going to bring in fandom when I'm going, you're losing your casual fans to the football fan. You just are. I don't know. Football fans are like, yeah, I'm waiting to tune into football. I got racing to do. No, it's the other way around, where I'm kind of burnt on racing. Football season's here. Giddy up, right? So I wish when they did this and they changed, the problem was they felt like it was boring. You could just be a top 10 finisher and win the championship, and people hated it. There wasn't enough focus on winning. So they gave like a 10, 15 bonus points for winning. Okay, but Fency getting second place was 170 points. So what is 15 points? It's minor. They changed it, simplified the scoring, which I like. Last place gets 1 point, all the way up to 40-some points for first place. That makes sense. Okay, well, now give your bonus of, say, 20, 25 points for a win. Now that offsets all those DNFs that did not finish, the bad races and the wrecks. You do put a focus on winning, and it's still a season-long endeavor. Racing is always meant to be a season-long endeavor. Bad things happen in the middle of a race. The reason I don't like the playoffs, I can't control when the idiot in front of me runs too long, damages car, cuts a tire, and now my pit strategy is all jacked up, or now we got to do a restart with a bunch of idiots driving over their skis because of things outside my control. You know, in the NFL, we don't have teams not in the playoffs running onto the field being hazards in the middle of a playoff game. But we do for NASCAR, and we're like, yeah, it's a playoff. Like, it's a gimmick. It's a sham. Yeah, so I can't.
You know what I almost said to you? I almost said you should call Brian France and tell him this, but he probably hasn't been the commissioner in like 10 years at this point.
I'd have to call Jim France, and trust me, I'm pretty sure I'm on a blacklist with NASCAR. I've heard that there's grumblings in like NASCAR, their new agreement, they've told the teams you can't have any disparaging remarks, so they'll remove you from the series.
Right. Rich Maletto, though, someone who I always love talking about football and NASCAR, and you can too, by going to our fantasyguru.com Discord. He's always in there. I call him the Fantasy Guru Elite Mafia guard dog, head of security, because he is just that, cares about the site very much. We all feel it and appreciate it. Rich, you did a great job with your streamers last week. This week, we're going to kill it again. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Hey,
Fantasy Sports Daily.
Thanks so much for having me, Fancy. I always love talking stuff with you, bro. It's great.
Yes, absolutely. And also ranting about trades too, because these are things in fantasy sports that we got to talk about. Fun topics. That's what it is all about. And speaking of fun topics, by the way, wanted to remind everybody that tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern in the DFS NBA Discord room, and also I'll be checking out the NBA betting. I will have my bi-weekly NBA chat. Whatever topics you want to talk about, NBA futures, you want to talk about team previews, I'm sitting in there, and if you don't have topics, I've got topics, and I'll just keep writing my comments and writing. But at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm someone that unfortunately doesn't have a lot of friends. So come be my friend in the Elite Mafia and go to the DFS NBA Discord room tonight at Fantasy Guru's Discord at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm there for an hour, but if the conversation's rocking and rolling, I'll extend there and stay 2 hours because basketball season is never over on fantasyguru.com. I want to thank all of you for tuning in. We'll say this. I didn't do many questions to be answered last time. I did see this, though, from Quinn. Looking at this team right here, I'm totally fine with it. I know with Joe Burrow, obviously, someone who has Burrow in 2 leagues, not happy, a sour taste in our mouth after week number 1. But I'm looking at this team overall, and I think you've got a very good amount of depth. And then when Hollywood Brown comes back, that is fine too. You got Brooks on the IR, who everybody is just so happy to see. The reviews are excellent. Got to get him off the IR, though, and then we'll see how that will impact. And it should be immediately the Carolina backfield. What do you do with this team going forward? You ride it out. You don't start making a bunch of trades. I'm fine with this with Najee Harris. You know he's going to get that volume. You can't be upset with the receivers that you have. So much depth there, so maybe keep an eye on your backs if that, but don't make any costly trades, and you're 1-0. Follow me on X and Instagram at FenceD Sports. Ray Flowers will be back for Fantasy Sports Daily tomorrow at high noon Eastern. And then on Friday, you're back with me as I'll help preview the rest of week 2 and, of course, react to Dolphins Bills Thursday night football. Make sure you catch Elite Sports with Jeff Mans on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. That's SiriusXM channel 87.3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Jeff Mans, Ray Flowers, and all of you. I'm Justin Fensterman. It's been a fun Wednesday. Let's win, because this is the place where winners win. FantasyGuru.com.